Herzlich willkommen, Ambassador Ossowski, here in your residence in Metro Manila. We are very glad to be here and to talk with you about the differences between Europe and Asia. What are the major differences between Europe and Asian culture?
Well, you see, Asia is also very diverse, so it's difficult to say European cultures like that, Asian cultures like that. It's the same in Europe. I mean, you have German culture, you have Italian culture, you have French cultures, Greek culture. Here in Asia, especially here in Southeast Asia, you have the Philippine culture, which is very much characterized by the Catholic belief. You have the Thai culture, which is a Buddhist country. You have the Indonesian culture, which is a Muslim country. So you have a lot of differences. But on a general basis, I would say that Southeast Asia is a region in the world which is very dynamic and with a strong population growth. But you can see, for example, that family structures are still very strong here. Especially here in the Philippines, you can see that people are very much family-oriented. They live in strong family groups. Perhaps that characteristic was for me the most striking one when I came for the first time here to the Philippines.
You mentioned already the differences between different ASEAN countries. How diverse is the ASEAN market for a European company, especially for a German company?
It's very diverse, as a matter of fact, because also the countries are so extremely diverse. You have countries with large populations like Indonesia, 250 million people, Philippines, over 100 million, and then you have smaller countries like Cambodia, Laos, with a few million people, or Thailand, of course, also a big country with about, I think, 60, 70 million people. So the markets of all these countries are quite diverse, but they are very strong consumption markets. So whenever it comes to consumption, goods, products, I think the region can be very interesting for European companies, German companies, but also all these countries prove to be good places for manufacturing, for services. Here in the Philippines, the business process outsourcing has found a very strong foundation, but also manufacturing. We have a few German companies, DAX-listed companies, but also small and medium-sized companies which manufacture here in the Philippines. So all in all, it's a very diverse market for consumption, but also for production. And I think, especially because the markets are so strongly growing here in the Philippines, 6 to 7% on a yearly basis in the last years, these markets offer a lot of opportunities. And we should not miss this trend. It's a real trend, because you will see that, I mean, in the 21st century, most of the people of humanity at a certain stage will live here in the Asian region, in the Pacific region. So I think for every company in Europe, in Germany, which has also a global focus, not only the European market, but also the global market, they should be at that stage very interested in the ASEAN market.
There's very often a hurdle for German investors, for German companies, that is not only the culture, that is also the language. How can the language barrier affect business communication in ASEAN?
I believe it will affect business communication if German entrepreneurs don't speak English. Here in the Philippines, for example, you find a lot of people speaking very good English, so communication is easy. You have other ASEAN markets where English is less widespread than here in the Philippines. But I would still say that English has become a lingua franca here in the region. So you definitely, as a European German entrepreneur, you need to speak English, and that's a good thing. But of course, it's not only about foreign words or foreign language. It's also about understanding foreign cultures. And it is very important when you act here, when you come here, as an economic actor, and you maybe find yourself in a negotiation position because you want to do a certain deal, it is very important to understand the local culture. For example, here in the Philippines, people are very reluctant to say no. For a German entrepreneur, it's much more kind of common. Once you don't agree with a certain proposal, you would immediately say no. So here your ears must be more sensitive. You must read more the body language. So it's not only the words and understanding those words, it's also the body language, it's the culture. And then only when you have a little bit of experience in that field, you can be also successful in your business. That's why I believe for every entrepreneur to become active here, it's also wise to look for a strong local partner. When you have a local partner who can also explain you the ways and means doing business here, it will facilitate very much your endeavors.
What is the advantage for a European SME, a smaller and middle-sized enterprise, to do business in ASEAN countries, particularly in the Philippines, regarding the location of ASEAN between the two big neighbors?
Well, ASEAN is a huge market with about 600 million people. By the end of the year, formally, the ASEAN Economic Community will come into existence. One must say that this is work in progress. I mean, there will not be a big bang, but for years now, the ASEAN member countries have been working towards achieving that goal, an ASEAN Economic Community. And certainly in the next few years that effort will continue, but now we have the start, or the official formal start of the ASEAN Economic Community. So certainly if you want to penetrate that market of 600 million consumers, it is very interesting for you to come here, for example, to the Philippines. Also as a small and medium-sized enterprise, you will understand the market better, the regional market, but not only the ASEAN market, but also perhaps the Chinese market, the Korean market, Japanese market. So I believe the Philippines or any other ASEAN country can be a good platform to get a better access to the Asian market. And then I would say for an entrepreneur here, it's interesting also to choose the Philippines, because you will meet a lot of people who have language skills, who can understand you immediately. I mean, Filipinos speak very good English. And you have very good work ethics. As I said before, here in the Philippines, people have strong family structures. And I realized that people like to project those family structures also in the company. So when they are in a certain company, the corporate identity will develop very easily and very fast, because people like to see the company where they spend most of their time during the day as their extended family. So you will very quickly find a certain loyalty, attachment of the people to your company. And I think especially when you operate on the level of small and medium-sized enterprises, you will appreciate this kind of loyalty, because that is always the essence and the very spirit which keeps a company alive.
You mentioned the language skills and also the other skills for work here in the Philippines. There's also one advantage compared to other countries in ASEAN, that is a religion. What can you say something about that, especially here in the Philippines? Because very often when I'm traveling in Europe and in Germany, the people don't know exactly what are the Philippines, and is it a Muslim country, is it a Christian country, a Buddhistic country?
Yeah, so the Filipinos are a Catholic country due to the Spanish colonization, which started in the 16th century. And so it is the biggest Catholic country in Asia. And of course, which also helps the communication, because many cultural references are the same with this Christian background. For us Europeans, for us Germans, it's very much easier to understand what's going on in the Philippine society, because these Christian traditions, we have them, of course, also back in Europe. For example, look, we are right now in the Christmas season. Christmas is a huge party here in the Philippines. I mean, I've never experienced such an intense Christmas as in the Philippines. The streets, the roads are being decorated not only weeks before Christmas, almost months before Christmas. And you have a lot of concerts, and the weeks before Christmas become very intense with a lot of fiestas and parties, etc. So of course that makes it also easier for us to understand. When you go to Thailand or Indonesia, to a Buddhist country or to a Muslim country, you will also appreciate very much the local traditions over there, the religious tradition, and it's also very rich, but it's, for us, it's more exotic. Exotism is perfect when you are a tourist, and I believe sometimes it's of course nicer when you're a European tourist to see the Buddhist temples in Thailand as compared to the Christian churches in the Philippines, because the Buddhist temples are much more interesting when you come from Europe than the Christian churches here, which look very much like European churches. But as a matter of fact, as an entrepreneur, it might be easier for you to work with in a society where you have the same religious references. I mean, don't misunderstand me, I'm very much a secular person, and I'm very much for separation between state and the church. I mean, that is our tradition back in Europe, in Germany, since the age of Enlightenment, and our societies back in Europe are very much dominated in Europe by this separation between state and church. This distinction here in Asia is perhaps less visible sometimes, but still it makes it easier for us to operate as an entrepreneur here in the Philippines, because you don't have to ask what is this specific religious festival you're going to celebrate now, because it's the same you have back home. When you have to celebrate the end of Ramadan, for us it's more difficult to understand, because it is not as familiar. So I think that these are very obvious reasons. Yeah.
That was a very interesting answer, and what of course is also very interesting for our viewers is are the diplomatic relations between Germany and the Philippines. There were a lot of activities within the last years. Can you explain a little bit where we are and how close the relations between these two countries are?
Well, we celebrated last year the 60th anniversary of our diplomatic relations, so that was a big event for us. But the relations between Germany and Philippines, they go back much further. Not only, well, I should mention José Rizal, the Philippine national hero, Dr. José Rizal. He spent some years in Germany, in Heidelberg, where he practiced as an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor. And he went to Berlin, where he finished the work on his novel Noli Me Tangere, which became the epic story of the Philippine independence fight. And José Rizal certainly came to Germany at a time, at the end of the 19th century, when Germany, the Prussian state, was in a monarchy, but people were very much discussing citizen rights, human rights, political emancipation of the middle class. And these ideas he brought back also to the Philippines and introduced those ideas from Europe about political freedoms into the fight and against the colonial system the Philippines was under at the time. So we have the formal diplomatic relations, but we have also this stronger emotional attachment with the national hero José Rizal spending some time in Germany. And then you can even look much further back in time. You know, Magellan, the Portuguese explorer, was responsible for the first encounter between Europe and the Philippines. He came here on a mission commissioned by the Spanish king and Roman German Emperor Charles V. And there are stories that the expedition, I mean, it was commissioned by the emperor, but was financed by a banking house in Germany, from Augsburg, the Fugger, a very famous banking family in that time, in the 16th century, and end of the 15th century, beginning of the 16th century. So with that kind of very early connection between Germany and the Philippines, we can look back at a rich common heritage. And I'm, as ambassador now today, of course, I'm very happy that the relations are working very well, are flourishing. Not only in the political field, but in the economic field. The trade volume is increasing year by year. And also in the people-to-people contact. We have a lot of mixed marriages, of course, but we also have more and more Philippine overseas workers, in particular on German ships. Not only the ocean steamers, but also on German river cruises. You will find a lot of Filipinos as simple seafarers, but up to captains. There are more and more captains on German ships. And today we try to get more Philippine nurses and health workers to Germany, because, you know, Germany needs, especially in the medical field, more people, more specialists, more nurses, more health workers. And the Philippines have a huge human resources capital, which we would like to tap and bring over to Germany more Philippine nurses.
That was a very deep insight and very interesting, with a lot of news. Ambassador Ossowski, I thank you very much for this interesting talk. I thank you for watching. Thank you, have a good day. Asiatische Grüße und auf Wiedersehen.